Barbara Gago. I'm the founder and CEO at Pando. I'm just here to introduce you all to Jessica and Matt. Very excited about this session. It's kicking off Pando Horizons. We've got a lot of great content over the next couple of days. So I'm happy to be kicking it off with a bang with these two. I'm going to let them do their introductions, but there will be time for questions. You'll be able to add those in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. I will hand it off to Jessica and Matt. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay.
That's the next session.
Lovely. Okie dokie. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Zoom is telling me you can, so good start.
Can confirm.
Thank you so much for having us along. Matt and I are really excited to chat to everybody today, and we're so grateful to be part of Pando Horizons. It's gonna be a really awesome day of great content today, all about performance and people operations and how to build a fantastic function that you can be really proud of. We obviously one small part of that. And we're going to be primarily talking about the idea of people operations as a product, which if you know Matt and I at all, you hear us talk about all the time. So Matt, would you like to do a little introduction to yourself, and then I can do a little introduction to myself?
Sounds like a plan. Hey everybody, thank you very much for joining. Bright and early for those on PST, and still pretty early for those on EST, but hey everyone. So my name is Matt Bradburn. I am the founder and CEO of People Collective. We're a company that helps tech companies and startups, scale-ups, pretty much anything in between, putting the right foundations for people to develop and grow. And I got super passionate about this idea of building people teams like a product team after reading Jessica's book, and then realized that I'd kind of built my own team like that already. So continued that journey. And it's been very fun engaging with people around the world on the topic.
Awesome. And my name is Jessie. I'm the COO of a company called Talentful, but I'm also the author of a book called Built for People, which is all about this exact topic. And Matt and I have been teaching on this topic for the last 8 months now, as well, teaching people operations leaders around people as a product. So this is almost like a lightning blitz through the concept. And I think it's really, really useful, particularly going into performance, because performance is one of those products that a lot of team members, and I say products in the context of initiatives you're building as a people operations leaders, have a lot of negative feedback for. It can be something that people have a really poor experience with. So I think kind of going into the understanding of how to build something that is super fit for purpose, that solves a problem, but also delivers an exceptional experience for your employees is a really great kind of framework and frame of mind to be in coming into today. So the first question, I don't think we have a poll, but feel free to pop it into the chat if you'd like to, is who is responsible for the biggest budget within your company? I don't know if I can see the chat.
I'm in the chat. Let's have a little look here.
We've always got shy people. It's 8 a.m. in the morning in PT, shy. But also we can take a guess, surely. Everyone's too shy to guess at all. The people team. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew knew the answer to this. Marketing's and Matt's throwing some red herrings into the chat. Oh. Yes, okay, amazing. We have 3 people, Andrew, Catherine, and Tana, who have all said headcount or people operations. So that's definitely the framework of what we want to talk about today. Depending obviously on what your company is doing, around 60% of your company spend, particularly in a SaaS world, which I think a lot of us probably are working in technology, 60% of your company spend is headcount, right? And then on top of that, you'll also have the additional budget that you'll be spending on HR initiatives, recruiting, et cetera, which makes the people operations team responsible for the biggest, basically efficiency gains that can come from a spend. Essentially, you are there to make this 60% of your budget extremely well spent, efficient, and great resource for the company, and also a great investment. So that really puts the role, I think, in a very different kind of philosophical headspace than one where you are just responsible for the HR budget, which is just a cost center. That HR budget is there to make that the investment in your headcount and your 60% of your P&L the best possible investment that you can make. So that's the headspace I really like for everyone to be in today as we talk about people operations as a product. And then the way that I've kind of framed this for the day is the three biggest challenges that we face as HR leaders, like in the boardroom against other C-suite members of our team, and also just external facing sometimes when you meet other business leaders, how they think about the kind of glass ceiling of HR and what's stopping you from being considered to be a really strategic leader in your business. I think a big way that we can kind of think about this and resolve this internal challenge is through the idea of people operations as a product. And Matt, I know you obviously work with a lot of CPOs and VP peoples and CEOs as well and other founders. We've kind of collectively come together and said that these are the three things that a lot of them will come up against or say that the HR team struggles with in the context of the kind of work that they're trying to deliver for the team. Matt, do you have anything to say about these?
No, I would completely agree, right? Like these are the three topical. It's not even frustrations, right? It's like I love my people team, but I wish they could get a little bit better at thinking commercially, knowing the business, demonstrating impact. And yeah, I would say that those are typically the biggest themes that come up from CEOs and CFOs. I would say mostly on the CFO front.
So what we're going to do today is do like a lightning round of talking about how you can use people operations as a product to design an employee experience, really with one of the main aims of like, is trying to improve the investment in that 60% of the P&L and really position yourself as an owner there. So thinking more commercially about your role as a people operations leader. The second one is really knowing the business, how you can use people operations as a product to really deeply understand what's happening across your teams. And then finally, how you can use people operations as a product to really demonstrate impact. And we give you a couple of practical examples there as well. So the first one that you might see as a challenge that we would like to, invite you to overcome with people ops as a product is how to think more commercially. So the big shift in headspace here is rather than seeing yourself as the kind of chief people officer, a service to the business, you are now the chief product officer of the employee experience, which means that the product that you are building for your team is a product that people are buying into. It's a subscription product that exists within a kind of system, a symbiotic relationship of other products your company is building. So what does that mean, right? We're saying people as a product about 25 times in this call, but what does that actually practically mean? How do you view this product, right? You can understand what your commercial product is. You're selling, razors if you're Harry's Razors or MacBooks if you're Apple. But what are you selling in people operations? Well, our answer to that is that your company is building three products. You're building your fiscal product, which is your shareholder value, your investor relations. If you're a bootstrapped business, then it's obviously a fiscal product there in terms of like the profit, maybe you're taking back to your founders or to your business. You've got your consumer product, again, very easy to understand. Some of you may be selling e-commerce, so you're selling practical physical objects. Some of you may be working in SaaS where you're selling software or tooling. Some of you may be working in services like myself, and then a consumer product is the packaging of how you sell those services to your team. But then we're also working on this third product, which is the employee experience. And your employee experience is a subscription product. It's something that your employees are choosing to buy into every single month until they hand in their resignation and churn from that product. And the way you think about building that product for them exists in the same way as your consumer product. It exists in a marketplace where they have multiple different choices. You could choose between working at Google, you can choose between working at your business, you could choose working like the local shop down the road that you have been a customer of for several years that needs someone to work in people ops. There are all these different options that you have in the market, and what's attracting you to your role is basically the same answers of what you'd be attracted to for your employees as their employee experience. So we really talk about these three things as having a symbiotic relationship. And a symbiotic relationship in this situation, and Matt, I'm sure you've got some great examples of this because we've spoken about this many times before, is you can have an incredible consumer product that does really, really well. But if your employee experience product is poor, then what you're going to end up doing is investing a lot of money from your fiscal product into kind of filling the gaps of this poor employee experience product, which means that then you're going to kind of see the trilogy collapse. And the same thing is if they're strong. Matt?
Yep. So let's think of a prime obvious example of that. There is a neobank in the UK called Revolut, which really struggled for a while. I would say it's not struggling now, and I'll explain why. So they had a great product. They really focused on what struggles do people have in terms of banking, particularly with international transfers, and how can I open up a bank account really easily? Like their fiscal product, great. What they're packaging up for consumer, great. But their employee experience, terrible. They were getting really bad reviews. A lot of people really frustrated with working there. Um, and they were kind of forced to be much more honest about their employee experience, which really transitioned the way they do things. And now you know that basically, if you're going to go work at Revolut, in the same way that if you go and work at Goldman Sachs, you're not getting nap time at 2 in the afternoon. You are going to have to work very hard, but you have potential for high outcomes, high ownership, and some great opportunities as and when that company comes to IPO, because it has been product-wise extremely successful. So it's doing well on its consumer product and its reviews there, and its fiscal product, and it's improved its employee experience. So yeah, it's getting all three of those pieces together because it was really struggling when it was having a poor employee experience, not just from the product itself.
There's this idea that these three things are symbiotic and they work together exactly. So your responsibility is to understand how your employee experience product fits in strategically to the whole. There's no point, to Matt's point there with Revolut, it's a very different employee experience product that someone at Revolut or Goldman Sachs is buying versus someone at, for example, one of my previous companies, Wonderbly, which was publishing children's books, right? There's a very different kind of experience you're getting in those two different businesses. And that is okay, because what you're trying to build is something that is unique in the market, that attracts the right subscribers that then stay on with your company to essentially give you the highest return on investment, the best possible investment that you have in that 60% of your P&L. So when you start thinking about that product, then what you start seeing is basically the analogy between the product funnel and the people funnel. So the product funnel is the one that you've probably seen your marketing team talk about a lot. You have all the way up in the higher levels of awareness, all the way down to someone being a subscriber to the product and then ultimately churning. Again, this is a subscription product. People product works exactly the same. There's a very strong analogy there. Employer branding, very similar to product advertising, the way that you're going out and talking about yourself on the market, acquisition, recruitment, purchasing decision, offer and acceptance, etc. Right? So at each stage of this product funnel, there is something that your team should be working on optimizing in order to make that funnel not leaky, attracting the right consumers at the top, really making sure that they're high return on investment consumers with a high lifetime value. And then ultimately that experience is heavily aligned with what you're selling them. So you're not seeing them churn out. There's a couple of little tweaks and things. Like, no analogy is perfect, right? But some of the things that I like to talk about is the idea that re-engaging your consumers, so re-engaging your team back into what you're doing as a company, is really the same as launching new features. If you had a static product that existed exactly the same and had no changes, what you're going to see there is ultimately people change, consumers change, their needs change. So your responsibility as a people operations team is to be constantly tweaking and changing the features and products you're building. So for example, your performance and progression process, it may be super fit for purpose for you when you're at a seed stage business when you've got 50 people. But then when you move it, or sorry, Series A stage business when you're at 50 people, but then when you become a Series C stage business and you've got 600 people globally across multiple markets who have different levels of progression and multiple managerial layers, that new features, those products need to be updated to continually engage your team and keep them engaged in what you've created for them. And I also think about promotion in the same context as upselling. You are essentially asking someone to deliver more value, but at the same time, they are in return receiving hopefully more compensation from you. There's a kind of mutual value exchange that expands, which is part of promotion. And then what you're really trying to do is continually engage your promoted team members because of their employee lifetime value, which we will talk about. So that's a little bit of the product and people funnel and how we think about it. But I think the big thing is if there's a lot of words that we've said there that you're not maybe having heard before, the most important thing to take away here is that your employees are customers of what you are building, right? So instead of the idea that you are there to serve the team as an admin or compliance function, instead, you are now serving them as customers that you're building products for. They've got a very specific use case in which they want a career, they want a job, they want engagement. How do you solve all those problems? By delivering a great product to them. And when you do change your mindset and really start thinking about the employee experience as a product, it means that you need to know your role as a commercial leader, which means really understanding this portion of the P&L that you operate within. You have 60% of the P&L plus this big spend probably on your HR spend, recruitment, engagement, benefits, etc. Understand that comes with a lot of responsibility and also fiscal awareness as well. That's interrelated, which means that you need to understand the P&L implications of your work. Suggesting a new product to be launched or suggesting a new benefits platform to solve maybe a engagement issue you're having in a team, all well and good, but really understanding what are the P&L implications of that as it comes to the whole of our P&L rather than just our HR budget is another step. So product managers and your VP product will understand the relationship between investing more money into a certain acquisition channel as it relates to the company's overall profitability or the product's overall lifetime value. The same is true for you. You really need to have a deep understanding of the commercials there. And also, I think working with people operations as a product means you start talking in the same language as your C-suite. The majority of your team, to the 3 product symbiosis we were talking about before, are spending a lot of time focused on that consumer-facing product. Pretty much all of their time is going to be spent in that headspace. So for you to start really utilizing that same language and way of talking with them and thinking about your work in the same context helps unblock kind of translation errors. It helps them really think about the work you're doing as having the same kind of outputs as what they're doing. And that really helps with making sure that conversations are more aligned, that there's more engagement, and ultimately that there's better buy-in from your entire executive team. Okay, any questions, any thoughts on that before we move to the next challenge? We've had some good comments coming through. Awesome. Okay, great.
Good.
So the next challenge is about knowing the business. So this one comes up, I think, pretty regularly in soft feedback I hear from founders, CEOs, and other members of C-suite team around, I really love our HR team. I think our people team are doing great work, but I don't know if they really understand how our business runs. They understand the people and what the people need, but I don't know if they really get the needs of the people as it relates to the company, right? Has anyone ever heard that before? I'm sure some of us on the call have. Matt, have you experienced founders coming to you with that problem before?
I mean, it is the most common one, right? Which is like a lack of engagement with other leaders, or maybe just as you said, like a difference of language, right? You'll get a CEO who understands and talks really openly and carefully and clearly with a CRO and a CFO around everything from like marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads to ARR to EBITDA, and they can have those conversations, or they might talk with a CTO around specific challenges in their tech stack. And it's something where actually some of the best people leaders I've worked with, they can speak all of those languages. They're able to engage as a CEO would, and they're able to understand. And most people kind of have that in them already. But yeah, it is knowing that business, knowing like what drives the financial instrument, knowing what language to speak, and then combining the kind of storytelling with data aspects to really think about actually how can I put that proposition across to the C-suite and be very clear in terms of what we're trying to achieve on the people front and how that strategy is built to support the business strategy, not built in silo and separate from the business strategy.
Yeah, I think, is it Gaurav? Is that how I pronounce that? Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name. Let me know.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes.
No problem, Gaurav. Yeah?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I think what you've mentioned here around systems thinking is exactly right. There is an element of being able to think about the kind of system that you're operating in as a whole, rather than just supporting individual human beings. And I'll give you a little bit more context around how I think about this. I think from my perspective, a big challenge to this ability to see the business as a whole comes from our org design that we typically use in HR. So for a very long time now, since like about 1995, a lot of people operations teams have been building themselves against what is called the ULRIC model or the shared services model or something similar to that. And I think for very large businesses, there's actually a lot of value in having like an ULRIC or shared services model, particularly because you're able to do much more valuable capacity planning when you have higher volumes, right? You're able to forecast. You know that if you're at a team of 600 or 700 people, how many members of your team are going to leave the team throughout the year based on attrition modeling. If you're a team of 100 people, it's actually much more difficult to do that. And it's much more difficult to do capacity planning when your team are working in a more siloed way. So this traditional way of kind of building your team with a VP people or a head of people or a chief people officer, a talent team, a people team, an L&D team, it actually starts to cause a couple of problems that I think ultimately lead to you being less capable of really seeing your business as a system. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So I feel hesitant to ask questions into the group because we have a very shy group with the exception of a couple of members of the team, but I'm sure we've experienced times where it feels like you have this very kind of patchy, hot and cold feeling across the capacity of your team. Your recruitment team feels completely run off their feet. They're absolutely sweating it. Meanwhile, your L&D team is really busy doing like forecasting or an exploration of what's happening in the market. Or your people partnering team is working on like a speculative project that they wanted to work on since Q4 last year, and now they have the capacity. Or actually, maybe you'll constantly all run across your feet and you actually don't know where another headcount would fit because one full-time headcount would kind of knock that out of balance, and then another team would become underutilized and another team would still remain overutilized, right? And I think this comes from, again, this org design that we have adopted from the Ulrich and shared services model for teams that just don't always need to operate this way. So the way that I think about my team is actually much less in the context of this person's responsible for L&D, this person's responsible for recruitment, and much more in the concept of our team is responsible for building products and then facilitating the human operations that go into supporting that product. So what I do is I split it out into human operations, which is the empathy, listening, coaching, values, ethics, running interviews, doing difficult conversations with employee relations. Yes, all of that is the stuff that no algorithm can do. You really do need a person to facilitate those conversations. But then actually the team comes together to build products. So to build the things that your team is utilizing for me, I do quarterly basis, but you could do this annually or biannually or even more frequently if you'd like. And everybody has these two jobs that they're working on in the people operations team. So then what we end up doing is we end up working a lot more like a squad where we have someone saying that the screen is blank when they are in. Okay, we'll have a look, Shay.
Barbara's on it.
Barbara's all over it. Great. So what you end up there is you may still have this reporting structure, right? Maybe you still have a person that's focused on talent from a reporting perspective and a person that's focused on people partnering from a reporting perspective, and their human operations is very much centric around this. But when it comes to building, what you end up doing, and this slide I acknowledge actually is a little confusing. I do want to clean it up a little, but it's bringing people together into cross-functional teams. So maybe you have a talent member of your team and a people member of your team and two members of your people team that are working in completely different business partnering units come together to work on solving a problem around acquisition. So they're no longer having the L&D team project and the recruitment team project, but instead, how do we collectively work together to solve a problem around we're seeing members of our team come through the recruitment process and do really well, achieve good feedback, but then ultimately we have a high attrition problem in probation. Something is happening there. Our squad comes together to resolve that problem. And maybe part of the problem is actually this final round interview is just too easy and the talent partner needs to really work on improving that final round interview. Well, who better to support on that decision-making process than the people partner who's seeing those attrition problems in the flesh, right? So it's then what you're able to do is rather than solve functional specific problems, is really see your company as a full system that you as a people leader are able to make better rational choices around how to solve those problems. And suddenly you're solving business problems rather than just launching projects functionally. Hopefully that gives you a bit of context and makes a bit of sense there. But ultimately, I think, yeah, Matt, take it away.
I was just going to say, give a little example of T-shaped individuals there and give you a chance to take a second to take a drink. Yeah, so like it's an example that I can pull out from real life. So you might have, say, some people coming from like traditional HRBP backgrounds, focused on ER, things like that. You might have folks who've been very specific around L&D or compensation. This is exactly what I had when I set up my own business. And what we built over time is this situation where these folks have this deep spike in one of those particular areas, but they've built up this capability in all of these other areas. They can support on these projects and engage and actually have like really useful inputs into different ways of doing things. So like someone working on reward might also work around like progression or performance challenges, or someone working on be like, yeah, we can engage in the performance piece because it's much more around like not just backwards looking, but forwards looking as well. How can we give people good career conversations, right? So that T-shaped piece is how you bring out those squads into life.
Awesome. I think it's a great example. We're going to give like a really practical example as well as we continue going through. But basically, I think this like challenge around business visibility, understanding how the company works, it's actually, in my experience anyway, I think actually a lot of HR leaders do really understand how the company works. It's actually a problem of output. It's more the fact that your team is structured in a way where they are so focused on delivering their functional responsibility that there's a lack of clarity about how that functional responsibility connects to what the business really needs on the whole. So I think how you structure your team really matters, and particularly structuring them in a way that allows them to work deeply into the org. So really solve problems rather than just launch something within their function. It doesn't mean you need to massively change your reporting functionality. Like, okay, Gaurav has already hit it on the head. Your stable element of your reporting can still be that you have 3 people reporting into you and they kind of mostly focus on L&D, mostly focus on recruitment. But then the dynamic element of your org design is that they work dynamically in squads that may change on a quarterly by quarterly basis to solve problems cross-functionally. The next thing is that you want to remove silos and really encourage that cross-functional work to that point. So how do you remove the feeling that recruitment hands over to people takes it from recruitment, and then it becomes a whole new problem set, and instead have your entire people team understand that they are all responsible for resolving attrition. They are all responsible for having better quality progression conversations. They are all responsible for development and promotion retention rate, making sure you're retaining people post-promotion. And then finally, a point that we're going to take into this next section is make sure that you're using both qualitative and quantitative data. So that human operations piece that you saw on the slide earlier, that will never go away. That is where you get really high quality qualitative information. Your ATS or your HRIS will tell you a bunch of stuff. Your engagement surveys will tell you a bunch of stuff. But what you really want to be able to do is get really good quality qualitative information from one-to-ones, from interviews, from manager relationships, from troubleshooting things you're building, sitting with people and saying, oh, you didn't understand the parental leave policy. Talk me through why. What happened here? That's giving you rich qualitative data that you can inform to solve business problems in an effective way. So don't pretend that doesn't exist. And I know that a lot of us don't, but it's important that we're balancing qualitative and quantitative here. Okay. The third challenge is this kind of preempt, like it feels like it's ephemeral, it's kind of ubiquitous, this feeling that the HR teams aren't always capable of demonstrating impact. We're capable of launching projects, we're capable of launching comms, but are those things really solving problems? And this is something that we're going to talk a little bit about, how people operations as a product can help you resolve this. So I'm going to give you a nice little couple of practical examples here, but also a really interesting thing that I heard from somebody called Nico, who is now working in a venture studio in Scandinavia, but he was a founder of a company that was focusing on employee engagement and employee engagement surveys called Platypus. And when I was talking to him, this was a big thing that we really jived over. It's this idea of, I'm going to give you a bit of an analogy, but I used to work and live in the Netherlands, and if the city council asked me, what do I think about the train system, the tram system in the Netherlands? At an NPS scale, I'd be like a 10. I'm like, always on time, super clean, love it, pretty cheap, great, great, great. However, the problem is I never really caught the train or the trams. I rode my bike everywhere in the Netherlands. So my opinion, my influence over whether or not this thing was value adding and having impact was actually probably not the place to be looking for. what the city council should be asking is the person that catches the tram every single day into their shift work, not only 9 to 5, but over the night shift, right? It's contextualizing where is this most important to people and how are we solving those problems. So we see this same kind of thing exist within people operations. When we send out a survey saying, how do you feel about our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in our company? And then we take the average across the entire team and say, well, on average, people feel 8.5 about it. Great. But what you have within that cohort of people you've asked that question of is some people who probably don't really care about this at all. This isn't the most high impact thing that you can solve for them. And for them, they're perfectly happy with what you're delivering. They're a 10. And then you have other members of your team who, for them, this is like the most important part of their employee experience. And for them, you're delivering a 3. On the average, it turns out to be okay. But what you're actually really needing to surface is that there are some members of your team where there's a problem that needs to be solved that could have really high impact for their engagement overall. But ultimately, it's kind of lost within the fray of how we think about impact from a people operations perspective, because we do spend a lot of time thinking about aggregates. Now, the reason I give this example is I think it helps frame the challenges that we have around thinking about output metrics in people operations because of the systemic ways we've been building our feedback loops. So what I like to do is try to break up output metrics. And actually, Matt, this is perfect time for you to talk about one of your passion subjects, which is what is the difference between an input metric and an output metric?
Oh, because I love NPS surveys just so much. Yes, input metrics and output metrics, they're delightful. So if we take an example here, let's say you're setting out some OKRs for your people team for the coming quarter, and one of your key results is launch an engagement survey. And I feel like I'm allowed to say this because I used to work at Peakon, and therefore I've spent my fair share of time launching engagement surveys. So, you know, I've been there. But right, like if that is like what you're trying to achieve, that is an input metric, right? Not an output metric, because launching that survey doesn't give you any insight, any information in terms of the quality of the employee experience that you're actually getting, right? Just doing that launch or launching a new performance program or whatever it might be. But often we end up confusing the output metrics and the input metrics. And what we will do is launch one of those and say, yay, that's it. Our work is done on the people team. I know, I've been there before. And instead, as just put in the chat there, an output metric would be like, hey, can we see a 20% improvement in DEI satisfaction amongst our team who rate it as a top 3 issue? That is a much more interesting and useful piece of information. So it's all about shifting that mentality from like, what are we going to launch to like, what are we going to track? What's going to have impact? And what information do we need to understand in order to make changes within the business as and when we see fit to make changes in the business or not accordingly as well.
Awesome. Love it. And what I try to do is I try to split the output metrics that you're focusing on the most in people operations into kind of buckets of what is really important. So I've worded these in a way that's very like HR friendly, right? But we've got impact, which is people's ability to have impact in their role. It's essentially what it is the return on the investment that you're making into their employment as a whole. Then you've got development, and development is, for me, it's all around this idea of internal promotion retention rate. It's promoting team, upselling them into higher and more experienced roles than your company, but then maintaining that headcount longer term. So making sure that you're really getting that value out of them longer term. Another one that we like to look at, which we'll talk about in more detail now, and I know Barbara and the Pando team also love talking about this, so it feels like a match made in heaven, is the idea of employee lifetime value to CAC payback ratio, or employee acquisition cost to lifetime value. So when we're thinking about that, so you think about this like DEI one, we're using an example now. See a 20% improvement of DEI satisfaction amongst team who rate it as a top 3 issue. What you may actually identify is that for your team to really have impact, which is, for me, this is all about performance, right? ROI in this context is how quickly are we getting people performant and how consistently are they performant within their roles and how consistently do they overperform within their roles. So on impact, what you may notice is actually the people that rank DEI as a top 3 issue, what it is causing for them is like attrition, lower performance, a lack of engagement, actually like less likelihood they get promoted into management, which means that there's a less likelihood that we're going to receive like a higher ROI on them. So what you're identifying is this issue, DEI satisfaction amongst this cohort of people in my team, actually has a negative impact on net promotion retention rate, because they're not getting promoted, or if they are, they churn out of the role because they really don't think DEI is being addressed. Great. So what you end up seeing there is like, these are the things we want to focus on, and these are the metrics, the output metrics that we want to focus on that will help us improve ROI, NRR, and ECAC. We're going to talk a little bit about ECAC because, as Gaurav has already called out, revenue per employee is something that I think feeds into this. So this is a graph which I think Pando again used an almost identical version of this, and we put one little tiny spin on this. This is all about employee lifetime value. So I think this is kind of the king metric. I really love to look at this from a HR perspective, because I think it gives you a very nuanced view of how to understand your responsibilities in terms of the commercials of your business. So when someone joins the team, they're a net value loss at that point. They are costing you money because you've had to spend acquisition cost on them. There's some kind of like hiring cost that comes along. Then they have this, what I call the aha moment, and it's the moment where they actually become performant. So different teams may have a different aha moment. For some teams, it is they are able to sell their first sales in the team. Maybe they're in the sales team. Maybe for marketing, it's they have finally understood the brand messaging and were able to send out their first performance ad on our performance marketing channel. Maybe in the people team, it is they were able to run their first mentoring session or their first onboarding session. Different teams have different kind of aha moments. But what is that moment that you're able to say, this person really gets it? They're now delivering value back to us. And then what you see is you should see this very sharp increase between the aha moment where they become value neutral and really performing in that role and delivering back value to your team. Then you maybe have a promotion. After promotion, someone still is kind of learning the new ropes of the role, which is why internal promotion retention rate is so important. You kind of start again of trying to get them more performant as a manager or as a higher leveled individual. And then what you may see is actually the value slightly decreases as they become disengaged until eventually they exit the team, and there's kind of this halo effect. So very, very strong members of your team, and I'm sure many of you have experienced these folks, still have a very strong positive relationship with your business, even post-exit. They may move on and take a new role, and actually their presence lives on. Maybe they're an engineer who architected a system that causes all of your other engineers to be very efficient. Maybe they're a people operations person who built such a strong culture in the engineering team or the product team, wherever they partnered with, alongside that manager, that has still pays dividends in terms of how those managers respond. Your responsibility is to really improve the sharp increases here and to improve the retention, so the amount of time someone's delivering value. There's also an argument that you can assist to improve this halo. But the other thing that you should be balancing is your acquisition and retention cost. So how do you improve how do you limit the cost of recruitment, the cost of onboarding, the cost of promotion, and any kind of increased HR budget and initiatives kind of proportionally to the value that you're adding to your company in terms of essentially what's going to be revenue per employee per head, revenue per employee per month, revenue per employee per tenure. Because as we know, the org design should be, again, a system that you deeply understand, that you're able to make nuanced decisions about how it works together. So I'll give you an example here of kind of contextualizing this idea of your revenue per employee being a decision that really does have a lot of impact from HR. Is I spoke to somebody maybe a year ago now where I said, revenue per employee is very important. And they said, well, actually, my VP sales technically has the most revenue per anybody because they are delivering 10 million of net new revenue this year, while our sales team's only, our marketing team is only looking at brand this quarter, right? Well, if that was true, why would you not hire 55 VP sales? The idea is actually that your org design is a system in which your VP sales is as necessary to hit that 25 million or 10 million target as your brand team, as the EA, as the 4 SDRs. And if someone's making an argument that doesn't seem cohesive with that system, so for example, a salesperson says, a VP sales says, I want to hire another 25 SDRs, and you say, do you have clarity on whether your sales process is repeatable enough that those 25 SDRs are actually going to help us hit that 10 million, or those 25 new salespeople are just going to be a cost? That is you then really feeding into understanding how that org design relates to our employee lifetime value to CAC. Hopefully that makes sense, and it's a little bit of a technical one. But essentially what you're trying to look at as like your kind of headline metric for HR in this new people ops as a product model is the cost to acquire and retain your team versus the value each employee brings over the course of their tenure. And you're never going to get perfect. I mean, Barbara obviously will have a very deep insight into this, but just as in marketing, no marketer is going to be able to say, I will bet my life on this CAC to payback ratio 100% as being coming true in the next 3 years. You're always forecasting to the best of your ability on the aggregate, thinking about cohorts. The same is true in HR. So what you'll really focus then on, if you want to improve your LTV to CAC, is retaining really strong performers. So building products that engage, retain, and ultimately make your strong performers more performant. Spending your HR budget really effectively. So making sure you're delivering in places that ultimately deliver value. And then finally, that point we just made about sales there is using headcount effectively to grow your company ARR, not just using headcount to make someone more hours efficient, but actually making them more value efficient. Okay, I think we're getting to the point where we're about to ready to ask questions, and we're going to give everyone like a little opportunity to get into question time. But before I get to that, I just want to talk about one thing as a kind of final takeaway from this whole people ops as a product space, which is, first of all, really understand the problem that you're solving. So what is the thing I'm trying to solve as it relates to the entire business? Is it that I'm trying to improve ROI through improving diversity satisfaction within these employee base? Or is it that I just want to launch a survey? Well, no, you should always be trying to really focus on output metrics rather than input metrics. Use various research methodologies. We didn't really go deep into this, but again, like allow your squad team to not just rely on surveys, but actually also rely on qualitative data, user testing, market analysis to really understand how to solve the problems you have in your business. And then finally, always try to seek an output metric. Did I actually solve this problem? Is there some kind of causal relationship between what I launched and what we're trying to achieve? And constantly be working between those two things. Because the closing thought from me is I am always trying to think to people about what is the last thing you implemented, which maybe initially made it a little harder for you as a people team, right? You really had to do a lot more work around your hypothesis. You had to build a better report. You had to get under the skin of a problem, but because ultimately what you're trying to do is make it better for the business. Because if you're thinking about your product leaders, if an ideal customer came to you asking for a new feature or a new product that they were willing to pay for and that would really engage them, you would never hear your product team say, no, because our current way works better for reporting. And that is like, I think one of the big changes in terms of our headspace we need to make as we enter people ops as a product is we want to constantly be building things that are really ideal for our ideal customers, that engage them, build our ELTV to CAC. And we're not just here to serve HR and compliance. That is a part of what we're building, as necessary as compliance in product management. But ultimately, we are here to serve our ideal customers. Okay. This is my contacts here. Matt will share his in the chat as well. And then we'd love anyone to have any questions that you may have. Feel free to ask away. This nice little 50s family scene, which calms me down.
Does look so relaxing there. Look
I know.
how comfortable they all are. Just living their life.
Just enjoying their experience. I'm sure there was like some reason why I kind of contextually put this in, but I just thought it was like a nice little question breaker. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and just come on up and ask. And we'll make sure that Matt and I's LinkedIn are also in the chat if you'd like to connect. Great.
Yep, that's going in there as well.
I think I'll chime in.
Hi, Audrey.
Hello. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I love this idea of translating and just speaking the language of the business. And I think, I think I'm very forward thinking on how we design our metrics and making sure we're not just doing, like activity metrics, but outcome metrics. But I find it incredibly hard to, especially, in a smaller company, you just don't have the data available sometimes. Or a lot of the metrics that show us impact are survey based. And we're already, I'm newer at my company and we're already talking about survey. What was the word I'm looking for?
Fatigue.
over serving, yeah, survey fatigue. And so I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you or others on the group can share just examples of metrics that have been helpful to you that have kind of hit this spot of kind of translating to how the business talks about things.
Yeah, so there's a difference for me between operational metrics and then like success metrics or output metrics of what you're trying to achieve. Operationally, I think I will look at the exact same things that everyone on this call probably is looking at. So like your tenure, the sick days per month, the attrition rate, your salary average per geolocation, like the same kind of health metrics that your board is going to want to look at. I will look at the exact same things. I think the difference really is about the kind of success metrics. I always have my team come into quarterly planning as thinking about things in terms of problem statements. So what is a problem you're seeing in the company? And I'll try and find an example, but an example would be like, I think I just pulled one out with the progression thing, so maybe I'll use that, is we have a great interview pass-through rate with good feedback, but then we see significant churn in the probation period, which is costing us X. Like you always have to have some kind of output, right? It's costing us X in money per quarter. Like that's a problem statement that has like, we have this issue. It seems that interviews look good, but probation is bad, which means that it's costing us this much money. There's something that's falling down here. So I asked my team to come with problem statements, and then the job of us throughout the quarter is to try and find a way that we can basically hypothesize and see if we can actually solve that problem. And the problem could be lots of different things. I think if you're built in a traditional Ulrich model, you may say, like, if you saw this problem, you would see it as a VP leader right ahead of. But your teams actually may not see, your recruitment team may not even see this problem because they are just recruiting, right? And that they maybe aren't always working the same roles, but your people team is seeing this challenge about probation pass through. So then if you put them together in a squad, what you're able to say is figure out, hypothesize, how do we solve this issue so that probation pass through rate becomes like closer to the market average, right? And then the way that they solve that problem, you don't need to solve that through surveys. What they can then do is go through the quantitative data. Okay, well, let's see if there's any relationships here between, there's a specific manager? Is it a specific team? Is it actually that one of our interviews massively overperforms and we have a very easy final round interview, which is making it too easy to get through to the higher stage? Is it that actually probation is too tough? Is it that we don't have good metrics? Like, try to do a deep dive into really solving this problem. And you can do that through user research. So I would say a good way to do this might be like a focus group or one-to-one discussions or looking through exit interview data. There's a lot of different ways, but it doesn't just need to be surveys. If you just did a survey, I think in this instance, what you may actually see is you would miss the forest through the trees. You may end up fixing the probation process, but actually the real issue is recruitment. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions at all? Anyone got any other specifics where they're like, oh, in our particular company, we struggle with this, or like I've tried to put this in before, or squads, how would you set that up?
We always have to share more. We have
Can chat.
I've shared an article from Pando here that is also talking about ELTV to CAC, which I think is really great. Like it's a very it's a shared opinion that we both have, and I think it's super helpful. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, like not to be selling the tool, and like obviously that's not what I'm here to do, but I think it's really interesting that progression specifically is such an important part of all of these three elements, right? Super important as it relates to performance. It's really important as it relates to internal promotion retention rate. And as you can see from Pando, they're also thinking about employee lifetime to CAC. So if this is something that you're interested in, there's like lots of sessions about this today. But I think if you understand this concept as you go into the rest of these sessions and as you think about progression and performance, it will really equip you to be making great decisions about the product that you're building there. Great. That's everything for me. Nice one. I think we will let everybody. Is there a right size people team? I think you can think about this mindset from literally a one-person team. So feel free to, I think there's a couple of things we've written over the course of time. Matt, I think mostly as the person that's been writing about this, is how to like think about this mindset. If you have like a one or two person people team, you don't need a full squad. It's just it's but more of a mindset change and a ways of working change.
Yeah,
Right.
it's about working in sprints, doing user research, retros, all of those aspects, right?
Yeah.
But building through others, as you might say.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to connect. Hope you
Ah.
enjoy the rest of the session today. And we're always around if you need to chat.
And sorry, one thing
Yes.
about the I don't know what the bug, we've been trying to troubleshoot it, but I just wanted to let everybody know who's on this call that it should be working now. You're gonna have to go back to the event page to join the next session through that link, but it should work, so sorry about that. So fun.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Good luck today. Chat to you soon.
Bye, everyone.